Now I'm going to go ahead and remove the carburetor. You should see on the side on your throttle linkage here and on the throttle cable, you've got two nuts, one on each side of this bracket. Mine aren't even tightened down from the factory. If they were, I'd need two 12mm wrenches, but I can just loosen them up. You want one to screw all the way up against the cable. On this one, you should slide this little black plastic piece off, and then you move the nut, loosen it up, and it'll come all the way off of the cable. Then you can just take this and work it backwards until you've got the cable and can slide that out through the bracket here. Go ahead and reinstall that nut just so it's not jiggling around. Then it should be easy to wrap this cable around and give you plenty of play. And this barrel on the end of the cable will slide outwards from the carburetor, and then your cable's off. Now if you go to the other side of the scooter, you should see there's a hose coming from the bottom of the carburetor, and it's going to lead down to a bracket with a little drain screw in the end of it. It's got an 8mm hex head bolt on there. Go ahead and remove that bolt. You may want to take this bolt and put it back in your CVT cover, at least loosely, so you don't forget where that goes. You should have a clamp on the inlet of the carb coming from the airbox, and a clamp on the outlet of the carb going into the intake manifold. You want to loosen both of those clamps up. Should just be a Phillips head screwdriver. Once you get those loose, you should be able to pull the airbox off of the carburetor. Kind of set that aside out of the way so you've got a clear shot that way. And then you can work the carburetor out of the intake manifold. The last thing you'll need to do to disconnect your carburetor is you should see a wire coming out of this enricher here. Trace that, follow where it goes, and then disconnect that. Once you've got those wires loose, you can remove your carburetor from the scooter. You can see a couple of the ways they try to make these carburetors tamper-proof. First off, there's a brass plug here in front of the idle mixture screw. On the bottom of the carburetor, you can see they use screws that snap off. Normally there'd be Phillips head screws here and you could just remove them and take the float bowl off, but instead now you've got to work on taking these out to be able to access the float bowl to change main jet, pilot jet, or even clean the carburetor. The first thing I'm going to do is remove this float bowl drain hose from the carburetor. Should just be a clamp on the bottom. Remove the clamp and then you can just pull the drain hose off. I'm going to be using a screw extractor set. This is a Craftsman, but you can get them from Harbor Freight or Home Depot or anywhere that sells tools pretty much. It should give you a screw extractor as well as a drill bit that corresponds with it, so I'm going to go with a number 2 and the drill bit that goes with a number 2. I'm going to use that to try and remove the brass plug that's over the mixture screw. Before I drill anything, I'm going to use a spring-loaded center punch to mark the very center of this brass plug. That way I'll have a good point to start drilling from. Just give it a few clicks. Should have a nice indentation right in the center. Now I'll line my drill bit up with the indentation I just made on the center. The drill, you should be drilling in forward, regular rotation. You should be able to feel it bite when it gets back there. You can tell when you're actually hitting something behind this brass plug. Once you do that, put it in reverse, remove it. Now you put the screw extractor in your drill. Make sure your drill's in reverse. Press down on that and start drilling. And there you can see it just pulled the plug out. Blow the shavings out with some compressed air, and then you should see your mixture screw behind there. You can just use a flathead screwdriver from here to adjust it once it's on the scooter. Sometimes you'll have a half circle or a D-shaped head behind there for the mixture screw. In that case, you'll need a tool like this. It's called a single D. I'm going to use basically the same process on the other side for each one of these screws. Start off getting your center punch right dead in the center of the screw, you can see there, and make a few indentations in it. Once you've got that done, I'm actually going to use the number 1 sized extractor here and drill bit. So again, you'll drill in forward. Once you've got your hole drilled, switch over to the extractor bit, put your drill in reverse, line it up with a hole that you just drilled, press down on it, and start drilling. And keep pressure on it the whole time, and then hopefully you can see it's pulling that screw out of there. So there's your removed screw. You want to repeat that process on all three of them. Once you've got these three out, you should be able to just pop the bowl right off. While I've got the bowl off, I'm going to take a look at my main jet here in the center and my pilot jet. They should have numbers on them. Mine, the main jet, is a 79 and the pilot jet says it's a 32. Now a lot of people say that these are jetted lean from the factory. Some people claim to have as low as a 70 main jet in there. Most common claims I hear are an 80 to an 85 main jet for the best results on a stock scooter, and 32 to 35 pilot jet for the best results on a stock scooter. I'm going to leave the 79 main jet and 32 pilot jet in here, but I will be going over my scooter later to make sure I have the right jet selected. If you don't want to go over the scooter later, I would suggest going towards the rich side and installing an 85 main jet and a 35 pilot jet. It's a lot safer to be on the rich side than it is to be on the lean side. If you do need to change either the main or the pilot jet or both of them, they're simple to remove and install. All you do is use a flathead screwdriver, unscrew them, they'll come right out. To reinstall, you just screw them right back in. You just want to get them snug, don't want to over tighten them in there. Also want to take a look at the float height real quick. If you've got the carburetor and hold it so that it's parallel to the ground, you'll see that this surface here is actually at a bit of an angle. But if the carburetor itself, you can judge it by the cap. If that's parallel to the ground, you'll want to see that your float is basically parallel to the ground. There's a tab right under here, there's a little metal tab, and you'll need to bend that up or down depending which way it needs to go, and adjust your float height again until it's parallel with the ground. It's not a bad idea to spray out all the passages with compressed air and carburetor cleaner while you're in here. Then you'll need to reinstall the float bowl, so you'll see that you've got little passages in here that'll line up with tubes and whatnot in the carburetor, line everything up. Slide that into place. You'll need 3 M4 by 0.7 millimeter thread pitch by about 14 millimeter length machine screws to replace the ones that you removed from the bowl that were snapped off. I also like to put M4 lock washers underneath the head of each one of those screws. Then use your new screws. Just screw those down snug to install the float bowl. Then you just need to reinstall the float bowl drain hose. So just slide that over this nipple right here. Once you get that on, pinch this clamp and slide it up over where that nipple is on the hose. Make sure it's secure. Another thing they do to these carburetors is they put these really cheap Phillips head screws in the top, and a lot of times you try to take them out and it'll strip the Phillips head part out of there instead of actually removing the screw. What I do is I find the screwdriver that matches these screws the best. In this case it's a number 2 Phillips head. Then I'll hold the screwdriver in the screw and give it a couple of taps with a mallet, and then hold pressure down on the screwdriver while I'm trying to turn it out. And even doing that, it's not going to bite in. And I'll try the other screw just in case. Again, it's not even going to turn the screw, it won't bite at all. Not sure if you can see it, but it's just stripping them out. Just with one turn here on each of them, they're starting to strip already. What I'm going to do is treat these just like I did with the broken off screws in the bowl and with a cap. Once the screws are out, you can remove this cap. Be careful, you'll see there's a little spring under there. Then you can see your diaphragm and slide here. Go ahead and pull those out. Just slide them up and out. Just push this needle up and out. You'll see there's a little plastic piece on top of it. Then you can remove the needle. On the stock needle, you can see you've got one position that you can put this clip into, while on the other, you've got multiple positions so you can adjust the needle height. And what that does is if you raise the needle, it'll richen your part throttle mixture, and if you lower it, it'll lean it. So you can see the other carburetors that aren't sealed give you adjustment, whereas the sealed carb gives you no adjustment. There is a way to richen up the needle settings even when they don't give you an adjustable needle. What you would do is go to your local hardware store, and you should be able to find machine washers like these. These are actually in metric. They're 2.5 millimeter inside diameter and 0.5 millimeter thick, so about 20 thousandths of an inch thick. You may also be able to find number 4, which is 1/8 inch inside diameter and about 30 thousandths of an inch thick. Just under the clip here, there's a little rubber O-ring or rubber washer kind of deal. And you'd want to slide that down off of the needle. It's really tiny, so don't lose it. Then what you do is slide the washers up under the clip, maybe 1 or 2, then reinstall the little O-ring under there. Then you'd slide that in like normal, and the needle will sit a little higher than it normally would and richen it up. To put the carburetor back together from this point, you should see there's 2 holes in the slide here. The larger one in the center, you want to slide the needle down through that. Once you got the needle in there, push it up from the bottom a bit. Take your little white cap here and place that over the needle like you see, and then let both of those slide back down into the slide. Make sure they're seated in there. Then you take this whole assembly, go over to the carburetor. You're going to drop this into the carburetor so the slide is going through this hole, and you should see in the bottom there's a hole, and you want the needle to line up with that. So drop that into place. Then you need to make sure this little tab on your diaphragm is aligned with a cutout on your carburetor. That's very important, otherwise the top may not seal. You can end up tearing the diaphragm. Then you should have a spring. Drop that down over top of that little white piece into the center of the slide. Then take your cap, make sure the spring goes over this little piece in the center. Push that down into place. You'll need 2 M4 by 0.7 millimeter thread pitch by about 8 to 10 millimeter length machine screws. You'll also want to get a couple of M4 lock washers to go underneath the head of the machine screws. Then just install your screws to finish up. So that's how you can deal with a sealed carburetor like this one, but a lot of people choose to go out and buy an aftermarket carburetor that's higher quality, like this one you see here. This one's a key-in. It's probably the most popular upgrade for these scooters. You can see it's got decent quality screws on the top of it. On the bottom, they're not broken off. They're actually decent quality screws so you can access the bowl. And there's no plug on the idle mixture screw. So this one will come with richer jetting, adjustable needle, and access to everything. It's just a higher quality carb in general. You do want to be careful if you're looking for one of these carburetors because there are fakes out there. You want to look for a black plastic top. It should say key-in, technology from Japan under it. It'll usually be stamped here on the front with a PD. This one's a PD19J. Key-in stamped onto the body of the carburetor somewhere. Right now I see you can pick these up for about $40 to $50 shipped on eBay. So I would strongly consider replacing the stock carburetor with one of these if yours is sealed like the one I've showed you before. I'm going to leave mine in place just because I want to see what it does. I'm more than willing to work on it, but if you want a better chance at having a trouble-free carburetor, I would go with one of these key-ins. To reinstall the carburetor, you'll want to start off by putting a fuel hose over this nipple right here. And again, install a clamp over that. Once you've got your fuel hose on, you can route this drain hose down kind of where you got it from, towards the bottom of the front CVT cover here. Then move your airbox hose out of the way, and you should be able to slide the carburetor into your intake manifold. And you'll see there's a little tab on the top of it right in the center that'll line up with a little receiver on the intake manifold. You want to tighten the clamp on the intake manifold down with a Phillips head screwdriver. Get that pretty snug. If Verify that you can't move the carburetor around, can't pull it out of the intake. Then you can take the hose coming from the airbox and put that over the mouth of the carburetor. Again, secure that clamp with a Phillips head screwdriver. Now you want to install the throttle cable. Take this barrel end here, line it up right here with this slot that it goes in. Should be able to just slide it in and then wrap it around right here. Now you need to make sure this nut is all the way up against the back at the end of the threads here, and then remove this nut from the cable here, the cable end, so you can free up the cable, and then you'll pull the cable through the slot in this little bracket here and then push it up forward. Now you need to reinstall this nut onto this piece here, and you'll want to adjust this so that you don't have a bunch of slack in your throttle. Once you get it adjusted where you want it, you need a 12mm wrench for each one of them, and then kind of tighten them against each other. Then you can just slide this little rubber boot all the way up here. Reconnect the wires from the enricher where you disconnected them from before, and then you'll need to make sure you tie these wires up with zip ties so they're not in contact with the engine and won't get pinched anywhere.